Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Alan Leveritt with the Arkansas Times. We're putting this on. We're sponsoring this event along with ACIS, the Arkansas Cannabis Industry Trade Association. And I have some real experts here behind me. And so we're just going to sort of walk through some of this. Barbara, I was just curious, you guys, y'all are a national. Okay. Well, I guess, and maybe I'm not sure how much you know about the structure of the medical marijuana laws in Arkansas, but are you seeing in other states where you guys are located, are you seeing them doing anything different or better or more interesting in the way Arkansas has structured its program in terms of how it might benefit patients?
I don't know if I'd say better, because I've really been very impressed today with, I actually live in Pennsylvania, work in Maryland, and I've been very impressed with sort of the structure of the law and how it's addressed. First of all, your criteria that you have to meet in order are much more extensive than a lot of states.
In terms of being a licensee?
In terms of being a person with a medical marijuana card, and it gives people the opportunity to be treated for something other than some drugs that we know have some terrible, untenable side effects. And so, I've been real impressed with Arkansas's law and how it's structured.
Okay, all right.
And she said, add that I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for 50 years. So you
know the medical side.
Only 50 years.
Is that all? Well, okay. Casey, I'm going to start with you, Casey, and go right around. Everybody, just introduce yourselves briefly, and I would like for you to start with the one thing that you would like to leave with your audience. If you got one point to get across about what it is you do, your area of expertise, these are consumers, what's the one thing that you would want them to take away from this meeting?
Awesome. I'm very proud that you allowed me to
kick that off.
Yeah, lead with that. So my name is Casey Flippo. I actually own two different businesses in the Arkansas cannabis space. I'm sitting on the panel today on behalf of my CBD company. Really, I'll say hemp-derived company, because we specialize in all facets of cannabinoids, not just CBD, Natvana. We've also recently broken into the medical cannabis space as a third-party processor located here in Little Rock. We are specializing in finished good production and custom product development on behalf of our dispensary customers. So we've been involved in the Arkansas cannabis space now for a little bit over 2 years. It's been an excellent experience watching the industry grow on both the medical marijuana side as well as the hemp-derived cannabinoid side. I think for me, in terms of general takeaway, not only from this session, but just in general, is making sure that any and everyone that is looking at cannabis as an attribute to their wellness, something that you're wanting to educate yourself on, it is quasi complicated, and we understand that us as industry nerds, if you will, we're gonna throw a lot of things at you, such as the entourage effect and the way that the cannabinoids interact with your different receptors within your body to elicit these different effects. I would just encourage you as an individual to take the information from these industry experts, utilize that as a solid foundation to go do your own independent research, and ensure that whatever you're ingesting or consuming into your body for the benefit of your mental, physical, or physiological health is exactly what you need from us. So we're all here to give you as much of the information as we can, but we're also here to act as resources moving forward to ensure that everybody gets the information that they need, not just today, but moving forward as well.
You're going to be a tough act. My name is David Lawson. I'm Director of Compliance and Retail Operations for the Source Dispensary in Bentonville. We've recently expanded into Missouri, so I might could go a little further on the question you asked her as well. We've seen some similarities and definitely some differences in those markets. I also won't claim the technical expertise as the other members of this panel probably have. I'm more the retailer. I'm the one here today. And really, to leave patients with one thing, just to know that they have the access to and an alternative to the more traditional means of medicine that have sometimes been detrimental to their physical health.
Thanks. I'm Barbara OCHESTER. I am a clinical person when it comes to cannabis, and I see patients every day in the Maryland market, and just completed my doctorate also in cannabis medicine, which was really important. And the thing I want to leave is that every single person deserves to have the access to this medicine. It's not a drug. It is medicine. It's a plant medicine, and that they need somebody to guide them through that process. So they have lots of resources.
I'm Patty Murphy. I'm a registered nurse practitioner. I'm married to Dr. Murphy, so we truly run a mom and pop operation. We don't, if your card doesn't come in the mail, you call me. I tell my patients, your card didn't come in the mail 2 weeks, call me. I put you on one line, put the Department of Health on the other, and we take care of it. We're a full service, and we focus on customer service. That's our number one goal, is to get customer service and help these people to get the medication that they need. The one thing, and we do work a team approach, I can't say, okay, I want you to go to this dispensary and buy this and take it this. I can't do that. So I leave it to these wonderful people. I say, okay, these are the list of dispensaries that are near you. Reach out, talk to them. If you're not comfortable with your bartender, find another one. But they're your source for all of your services that you to get your pain relief, etc. One thing I want to go away with is the patient is a consumer. If you don't like somebody, go somewhere else. If your doctor doesn't like medical marijuana, if you don't sign a HIPAA release with me where I can talk to him, he's not going to know unless he does a drug test. So you're the consumer. Find a doctor that will support you in this journey.
Hello, my name's Angela Campagna. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a certified clinical trauma professional. I own a business in Conway called Face to Face Therapy, and I've been treating trauma for over a decade. During that period, you see a lot of pain and suffering with people who have been exposed to trauma. So I really want to make sure that I can get my clients access to things that can make them be more productive in their life and function better and be at their optimal mental and physical health. One thing I definitely hope that we can take away from here is that therapy is a huge piece for recovering in trauma. Medical marijuana is another amazing asset and tool that can help you manage symptoms, but it will not correct or help you in these maladaptive behaviors that you've created being exposed to trauma and living in that situation.
Angela, when you're treating veterans, what's the most common conditions you deal with, and what is it that's unique about treating veterans versus the general public?
Well, veterans do tend to have more likely trauma. And definitely you do run into issues such as combat trauma, which is a little bit different, but trauma's trauma. So if you're a veteran or had sexual trauma or bullying trauma, it affects the brain the same way. And the treatments are still all the same. Veterans do usually, and we are having after this at 3:30 a veterans panel, second floor. I just got confused where we were. Yeah, down the hall in my room, we are having a veterans panel at 3:30. There'll be combat veterans there, and we can discuss and you can ask questions. A couple of things that veterans definitely get concerned about is if they are receiving benefits from the VA, if those benefits could be stopped because they have the medical marijuana card, and that is a rumor, that is not factual. They also usually have more questions related around guns because that's usually a part of their lifestyle. And that is another thing that people should know, that the VA, they do find out that you're diagnosed with PTSD, or they do diagnose you with PTSD, you cannot lose your gun rights from that through the VA. So in coordinating with veterans, it's another layer of coordination. If you are coordinating, if they want you to coordinate with the VA, usually they don't, but in some cases they might. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much. Patty and Barbara, what do you see? What conditions do you come across that seem to be most treatable with cannabis, or the most successful, the easiest, where you can just like ding and go, yeah, this is an easy one.
Neuropathy, chronic pain.
Neuropathy?
Neuropathy. We get patients constantly come in with diabetic neuropathy, and they tried gabapentin, they've tried this, they've tried that, and those meds work for a while, and then they stop. Neuropathy, hands down.
Really?
Everybody comes back just raving about medical marijuana and neuropathy.
My father had neuropathy in his 90s, and he tried everything in the world, and he never tried marijuana though.
And we have patients come in for their initial visit that will be on 4 and 5 oxys a day, come back for their recertification clinic, and they're off of everything. So chronic pain's been another big one for us.
Barbara?
I totally agree. I think the interesting thing that happened this year or over the last couple of years is that the flip, that now anxiety is our number one diagnosis, followed closely by pain. And anxiety, either PTSD associated or not, and then followed closely by pain and insomnia. But that pain catches that neuropathy. And chemotherapeutic agents cause you to have neuropathic pain later on in your life. And it hurts people really badly.
So how do you treat, and this is just open to any of you, how do you treat symptoms of a disease or a condition like anxiety and still be able to go to work in the morning? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
it knocks me on my tail, and I'll just be
Well,
honest.
it does, but that's because of the components of cannabinoids in whatever that you're using.
So I'm not using the right stuff.
It depends on where your goal and where you want to go with it. If you don't want to be stoned, there's certainly a way to handle that. Even if you have a little bit of THC in your product, you can mitigate it with CBD, and you can really sort of stop that euphoria. But it's one of the very few cannabinoids there's lots of numbers, 89, 111, 144 cannabinoids that have been discovered in Israel.
Uh-huh.
But of all of those, there's only a very couple that have any kind of euphoric effects. Most of them are very much more therapeutic.
So I can, even using marijuana, I can mitigate the euphoria and still get the
benefits,
the health effect.
That being said, I don't know if you've heard the radio ads on TV. On the radio, they are stating it doesn't matter what kind of marijuana you have used, whether it's medical or not. If you have used marijuana and you're driving a car, you will get a DUI. And there's not a breathalyzer they can do. I've talked with several state police, several of our local police. If it's in the car with you and you've gone over, if you've dropped your keys or whatever and gone, you're going to get a DUI.
So they assume
they're cracking down on that
just
now.
the fact that you have marijuana in your car.
Unfortunately, because
So
there's
if it's-
not a test they can do on the spot like a breathalyzer.
And how do they get a conviction on that?
I have no idea. I've checked with several police officers, and it's unfortunate. Their response is, this is for home use. I mean, it states in the law, it is for home use. So just treat it like, you go from the dispensary, you leave it, and go.
Right.
But listen to your radio ads. They've really started to crack down on that. Just
Okay.
recently, we've noticed.
I had a conversation with David Couch, who was instrumental in passing this first medical marijuana law. And of course, it says in there that you can't. It's against federal law to bring marijuana over state lines. And so I said, David, where did the seeds come from? There's this long silence, and he says, "Immaculate conception." That reminds me of how you get it home. From the same way. I'm just curious, is there any difference in Missouri and or what is the difference between Missouri and Arkansas?
What is the difference? There's a little less regulation And the regulatory agency in Missouri is the Department of Health.
Okay.
So they seem to take more of an approach of they want to see us as a facility do things correctly, where Arkansas ABC, it feels more like they're looking for a problem.
So it's a
they
more
wanna
cooperative.
find, it's like their goal is to find the things that you've done wrong in Arkansas. The Missouri Department of Health seems to really guide us and help us do things properly.
Okay. All right. Casey, what's going on with all the edibles and the different additional, what are some of the ancillary products that are coming on right now that people might be able to take advantage of besides just smoking weed, and getting their lungs?
Yeah.
And that's some of the stuff that you're working on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are multiple delivery methods for all types of cannabis. Like I said, the past 2 years, we've specialized on the hemp-derived side, which, for just clarification, hemp-derived CBD is kind of the general term there, but it's really a full spectrum of cannabinoids with lower dosage amounts of THC present in the initial sample. So your flower material is regulated by the state plant board here in the state of Arkansas. The flower has to test below 0.3% total THC before it can be processed into finished goods. And what that's going to do is that's going to mitigate that euphoric effect or the intoxicating agent of your within your system. So on the CBD side, I mean, realistically, the mediums or the delivery methods are pretty much universal. There are some technical differences when you talk about the acid being attached to the molecule. With CBD, crystallizes differently than when it does when it's THC. But overall, vape cartridges, gummies, chocolates, I mean, really into any type of topical agent, ingestible method. One thing that a lot of people kind of skip on is your skin is the largest organ of your entire body, right? That's where you get a lot of absorption rate into your bloodstream. And I think a lot of people from a direct application perspective kind of take that by the wayside, especially with high THC products, because, the traditional delivery method is either through smoking, inhalation, or some type of edible ingestion. So it's really important for people whenever they're distinguishing what type of medium or what type of application they want to go to utilize the expertise at some of our great dispensaries, talk to the bud tenders, talk to them about exactly what you're trying to accomplish. And a lot of those people, I know a lot of the business owners in this space, especially in the state of Arkansas, that have well-trained staff that can kind of guide you towards the best application for you.
I'm just curious, you mentioned bud tenders. What do you guys do to train your bud tenders to make them someone better than me that knows nothing about it? What do you do when someone comes off the street and they pass their federal background check, and how do you turn them into a marijuana expert?
Short answer is anything we possibly can.
Yeah, very good.
And we've gone as far as, I hate to keep talking about Missouri, but in the move up there.
Yeah, you need to bring it up to your mouth.
Bring it up to the mouth.
No,
Okay.
I don't test it.
Hello?
Okay,
Sorry.
good.
In Missouri, we brought in a training staff of experienced bud tenders from Arkansas and really a full training program, and which we'll institute here and use for future hires in this space. But 3 or 4 day training session, full days, rather intensive, just any information we can provide, and we constantly encourage them.
Do you find that there's a lack of information out there?
A lack of education out
A
there?
lack of information.
There's a lot of information out there. It's hard to know who to trust. I mean, just like anything else on
Sort of
the
like
internet.
the internet. Gotcha. Okay.
Just to hit back to the trending, I think that one of the things I've noticed recently is the influx of new cannabinoids. We never saw THCV before the last year or so, and THCV will change your glycemic index and has great implications for diabetics.
Really?
Huge implications for diabetics. So THCV is one of them. It's also an appetite suppressant, which doesn't hurt.
But Bar, how do I access THCV.
You go and just like, our training program is very similar. It's intensive. I not only train on a yearly basis, but I also, if I find something new in the news, I post that immediately and I'll do little quizzes because if you don't, then you can't be sure and everybody read it.
Sure.
So I'll do a question or two. I probably get 5, 6, 7 alerts every day. I've got alerted with any kind of research article that comes out on that has to do with cannabis. I use a database called CannaKeys extensively. There's 4,770 articles as of this morning
Wow.
on research for
Okay.
cannabis. And so the trend is to see what's new and coming. CBC, the anti-proliferation for cancer cells. I mean, it slows those cells down. And so those are the things that we really want to know. And as they come in the products and they've been bred into the products, then we want to use those for people who
Very
are
good.
suffering from different cancers. or
So,
whatever.
you're a center for this information, but then how do you dispense it down to Arkansas from Pennsylvania?
Well,
to the-
we
to
are
the bud
a
tender?
national company, and
Yeah.
certainly I actually wrote our patient handbook that we distribute to everybody. We have other publications that we actually do share. I give them to my boss, and I let him do with what he wants to with them.
Uh-huh.
But I think that we share the information pretty well.
Okay, all right, very good. Angela, are there any mental or any mental conditions or emotional conditions that we should not treat with cannabis?
No, I don't. I know that in Arkansas, it's the only mental health that is accepted for your card is PTSD.
Mhm.
But I personally think that there are several others that it could be very helpful for.
Such as?
Eating disorders,
Really?
borderline personality disorder.
What kind of evidence you have of that? I mean,
Dissociative
borderline
disorder.
personality is pretty serious. I mean,
Yeah.
is there any evidence that you have that would say, well, this is good?
Borderline personality disorder is very serious, and it's when I first came into this field, I specialized in borderline personality disorders, and I do a therapy specifically for that. That was made for someone with BPD. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy.
Okay.
And in that, a very key component is 1, learning how to manage intense emotions, and 2, being mindful. And when someone with borderline personality disorder is so elevated, so in intense emotion,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a great way to get them to come down from that. Cannabis can do that.
Really?
They can help. It can help with the mood regulation. It can help with lowering. We also in this therapy say work with borderlines that they don't have a super high threshold for tolerance of things, and so we work with them to give them a higher threshold.
We
So-
need tolerance of just emotional conditions or of marijuana?
Emotional conditions or interactions
Yeah.
with people.
Uh-huh.
My husband gets me mad here. Let's try to move this up to I'm not really mad till I'm up here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see cannabis helping in that range too, of building more tolerance of frustrating situations in life.
Gotcha.
Because people with borderline also really struggle with those interpersonal skills because they don't have the tolerance for that.
And marijuana can
I
bring that
I believe that.
fury down?
Yes. I don't have any clinical research, but I have seen that in my practice.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Really?
Mhm. Mhm. So, for borderline and for PTSD, SSRIs are not effective.
What is not effective?
Antidepressants.
Uh-huh.
And with borderline, rarely effective either. They're one small piece that can be helpful. But again, with both those things, the PTSD and the BPD, you've got to do therapy and change the way that you're adapting to the world. Cannabis, I can see though being very helpful in that situation.
Okay, very good. Do y'all see any conditions on the list of qualifying conditions? You see any on there that you think ought to be removed? At one time, glaucoma. Okay, not
Lower
for
the intraocular
not for
pressure.
symptoms on the stuff itself.
And,
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
we learned that for glaucoma in particular, they're still looking for that medium that'll hold the cannabis to your eye for longer, because right now it lasts about 55 minutes.
Wow.
Not probably appropriate to be getting stoned every 55 minutes. And it's THC that actually drops that intraocular pressure. So they're looking for that medium that will address and stay on the eye.
Gotcha. Patty, what are the demographics, the people that you see when you're seeing people for medical marijuana cards? Has it changed any since it became legal?
Most of our patients, I'm going to say 90% of our patients are 50 years old and older. They're just tired of hurting. We have quite a few PTSDs. Most of those are also older, but our demographics, I'm going to say, funny story, with us, we do the whole thing. When patients leave our clinic, they're waiting on their card to come in the mail. And I'll say, okay, honey, get out your smartphone now and open your browser. Can you tell me what a browser is? And it's no lie. And yes, we walk them through that process. It's the older people. I see that we were speaking earlier, how it used to be taboo. It was don't use marijuana, that they're now accepting it and the stigma is coming down.
And that's because they've come to a point where either the medicine is not working, because opioids are not for chronic pain. They've never been for chronic pain. They're for acute pain and should only be used for a brief period of time. But people sort of get stuck in that cycle and get addicted. And, they're just, 57% of my population is over 65. They have suffered from that sort of stigma kind of thing, nervous about being in the dispensary, but they've come to the end of their traditional allopathic medicine rope. They just can't do it anymore because it's not working, or the symptoms are so untenable that they can't handle it anymore. The biggest one is constipation. There are cases of small bowel obstruction because of constipation, because opioids.
This is because of opioids.
Yep.
Wow.
There is a drug that Purdue made that stops opioid constipation syndrome. Now that should tell us something. If they had to make a drug to stop the constipation that their drugs cause, that's not a reasonable thing.
Yeah. Gotcha. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Oh, no, that's good.
Okay, very good. We'll leave it on that. So, Casey, you're a processor, so you're doing all the gummies and this and the lotions and this, that, and the other.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that was sent in says, what unmet patient needs do you see in the cannabis products that are being produced, and how do you see processors fulfilling those unmet needs?
So I would say unmet is not the word that I would speak towards. It's misappropriated in terms of like the patient needs. Okay. So one of the things that I've seen in, I guess, kind of talking about the medical marijuana side, even though I'm not supposed to today. One of the things that I've seen in going in and talking to the individual dispensaries is every single dispensary has a series of patients that they're trying to cater to a specific need, right? And in large part, your traditional cannabis patients or your traditional cannabis users, especially those that are 50 years old and older, most likely whenever they begin their cannabis consumption, it was flower. It was completely a flower market, right? Back in the day, vape cartridges, gummies, edibles, all those other applications, unless you're cooking it up in mom's kitchen, that wasn't really a big thing that was made available to people. So I think that really looking into each individual patient's needs, and as I talked about earlier with the topical applications, right? There are specific benefits to utilizing a topical application as opposed to an ingestible application that the individual patient may need, right? So I think that it's on at the dispensary level, and I will say this from my personal experience, I think that in Arkansas, because we have such an intimate, and I know you really love Missouri, but I love Arkansas. So no, I'm joking. No, but in Arkansas, you've got such an intimate group of dispensary ownership, and it's such a self-regulated market that these groups are really striving to raise the bar from bud tender education all the way down to consumer education. So they're doing an excellent job. Like, I have a few of my initial customers that I'm working with that you would be surprised. I mean, we'll sit on Zoom calls for hours on end, not talking about the products we're developing for them. We're talking about the applications, reverse engineering the solution starting at the consumer and working our way back to what delivery method we need to provide them with and what type of profiles, whether it be a full spectrum, a distillate-based, an isolate-based, something that solicits more of the entourage effect, different terpene blends. There's so many things that our dispensary owners are really, really catering to make sure that they're taking care of their patient population. And I think that the market, as we continue to evolve and as we hopefully move even towards a recreational market in the near future, it will continue to evolve as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Y'all, I've got more questions, but do y'all have any questions that you would like to ask our panel right now? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Not well studied right now. A little bit of impact just in that it's CBD in particular is neuroprotective and actually protects some of those neurological fibers that go, and that's all we really know right at this moment. But another comment is, if CBD doesn't work in one way, like if you're chew it up in a gummy and it doesn't do really well, you can change routes of delivery and you get better bioavailability. Certainly inhalation change is different than the bioavailability in a something that you digest. And so all is not lost if CBD does not work for you the first time. You can change different routes of delivery to see if you can come upon something that works well for the patient. A lot of studies being done. I think there's 2 or 3 human studies being done on autoimmune disease.
Is there any place you could direct her? Are there any results from those studies or anything that you could hook her up with?
I get almost all of my information from this database called CAMPAGNA, and it is a subscription service. It's not very expensive, but you can actually plug in the disease and say what's being done on autoimmune disease.
How do you spell that?
CANNA, capital KEYS.org.
CAMPAGNA.
CAMPAGNA.
Okay.
.org.
CAMPAGNA.
.org.
It's interesting. Any other questions right now? Okay. You mentioned, we're talking about CBD. So in case, or y'all, any of y'all can help me on this. So Arkansas has made it against the law on flour. What is that? Actually I had made it, regulations limiting the availability of hemp flour. Has it restricted optimal patient care? Has it hurt patient care?
Right. Yeah. So there's.
Explain what that is.
Yeah. I mean, basically the hemp regulations in the United States was brought to fruition primarily in part by the 2018 Farm Bill, which made it, nationally recognized, and state by state were required to put their individual, stamp on the hemp industry nationwide. But due to a plethora of things, there's not a full-fledged federal source to kind of regulate nationally. It's more of a state-by-state deal. And that's what you're referring to. A lot of states actually have the access for, patients, consumers, whatever, to utilize hemp flower, just the same as your medical marijuana flower, with obviously less THC properties in it. The state of Arkansas, however, based off of the rules that were written within the state when we passed the industrial hemp laws back in 2018, it basically states that a licensed grower within the state of Arkansas can only sell their flower material to either a licensed processor or to process into finished goods themselves. And because the rules are stating that directly, it is prohibitive to have any type of direct to consumer distribution of flour, if that makes sense. So it's simply in my opinion, it was probably an oversight. It was not recognized as something that would be.
Does that mean that we have to the farmer has to export his flour out of state?
I've seen a lot of workarounds to that in my few years in the industry. Obviously, probably
But
none
that's
that
the
I want to
effect
talk about on a panel.
It forces that workaround. Is that right?
Yeah. So there are ways to get flour as a consumer in the state of Arkansas. Where you're going to see some restrictions is Arkansas grown flour on the hemp side, and Arkansas retailers are going to be currently prohibited from selling that to you directly.
How has that, if in any way, affected patient care?
Well, I think it reverts back to the same things that we've been talking about in terms of the people that actually look to cannabis as a true treatment. Historically speaking, I think that the natural ingestion method is through the smoking of the flower, right? That's what a large part of the consumer and patient population are used to. And I think that by restricting that, especially for things that are, in my opinion, as beneficial as CBD and CBG and other hemp-derived cannabinoid dominant strains, I think that you're limiting patient access and you're limiting patients' ability to find some of the best solutions, or at least you're forcing them into a delivery method that they may not be as comfortable with or as used to. Whereas at the medical cannabis or medical marijuana, from that side of it, they can go to a dispensary, and I would say probably the flower sales constitute somewhere between 60 and 75% of total sales dispensary to dispensary. Wow. So it's a big deficit when you look at kind of those, crossing over the lines from what the consumers want. They clearly like flower, otherwise that wouldn't be the leading categorical sell at the dispensary level. And when you go to the hemp side of the market and prohibit them from being able to buy that directly, it creates a little bit of a problem.
A supply chain problem.
Right. But there are some really great processors that can make awesome products. Really? If necessary.
It's just a rumor?
Yeah, I've heard it. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this may be for you. So let's say I don't know squat, okay? And I'm coming into the dispensary and I've got a condition. I've got my card. And how do I learn what it is I need? I mean, there's trial and error. The bartender, the bud tender says I need this. But are there any other tools that I have as a patient to try to narrow this down so I don't have to have trial and error? Any thoughts on that?
It depends on who you have available, but certainly I know we have people in our dispensaries and myself sort of in the Maryland market that you need an assessment. You need from somebody to sit down. I want to know what meds you're taking to make sure that you're not going to have any drug-to-drug interactions, what your personal goal is, not what I think I could do for you, but what is your goal? If you tell me that you don't want to ever have any pain again, I'm going to tell you that that's unrealistic. But that we might be able to reduce it significantly and that you will feel better. And so I want to know all about that. Have you ever smoked cannabis before or had cannabis before? Have you had a bad event or has it been reasonable? And mostly about your goal and how we can put the right medicine together. And I don't ever do it by strain. I don't speak strains. What I do is cannabis profile. You need this kind of cannabinoid, either CBD or a little bit of THC in these percentages, and you need these particular terpenes.
And then you match that to a strain.
And then you can give it to any cannabis guide in our case, or bud tenders anywhere, and they can pull the products, because I cannot say, go buy some White Widow. That's prescribing medicine. I can't do that.
Oh, really? Okay.
None of us can do that. But I can say, a lot of patients have told us, and this is what I say to my bud tenders, a lot of patients have said to us that they've had excellent success with this particular product. You can say that, but you can't say buy this.
Okay.
Just to elaborate on that, I obviously don't own a dispensary, but a lot of it plays into patient perspective too, right? Like when you talk about traditional medicine, going to your PCP and you're trying to resolve a certain issue, they're utilizing, my wife is a doctor, she's a physician, and I promise you, they utilize the exact same methodology as the bud tenders are, right? A lot of it is trial and error. When you're talking about dosages and you're talking about implementing a new medicine for first consumption use. A lot of people, fortunately, when they come into the dispensaries, from at least my perspective, they have at least a degree of knowledge about what they're looking for. And then it's up to the cannabis guides or the bud tenders to kind of adhere their program to that specific person. But it's very important for the patients to understand too, because I think that there's something to be said about walking in and seeing a white coat and then having that person work through a trial and error with a series of opioids or SSRIs or whatever they're catering towards, and then going into a dispensary with your bud tenders or your cannabis guides, and then them working through a very similar process, but that patient having, frustrations with the process because it's not coming from somebody that's perceived as, I guess an expert like a doctor would whenever they're working through that same process. Right.
I just want to add, one of the things that I always try to do is be fiscally responsible. I've already told you that 57% of my patients are over 65.
Right.
A lot of those people are not working. And if they live anywhere close to a dispensary, I will say to them, get the smallest amount you can. I want to provide a revenue stream. I don't want somebody to make a big spend and then get totally irritated when they get home and it doesn't work,
Right.
and then never come back.
Right.
So get a little bit. If you're close enough, let's go with that. If we need to tweak it, we will. You can purchase something else and really make them understand that we can't take it back.
Right.
And so we really want to do that. But we heard a story yesterday, and I can't remember where we heard it, but that some young woman paid for her. That was from you. They paid their fee to get their card. They went to a dispensary and they spent $900. That's unethical. That's unethical. It should never be done. You don't want somebody to go home, because then they get home and they don't know what to do with it anyway.
Right.
I always have people journal. If you journal, you're much more likely to get to your sweet spot more quickly. And there are apps, wonderful apps.
Are there any drug? And Patty, I want to get to you. First of all, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to say that, and that also falls back on your clinic. At our office, when you come in for a new patient visit, it's usually an hour. You get time with him, and then you get time with me where we go through and your application's filled out complete. You paid your $50, but then you get to visit with me, and we send each patient home with a card talking about sativas, indicas, terpenes, do this. We tell them how to keep a medical marijuana journal. Do you realize that there are 9 apps for medical marijuana journals that are absolutely free to the patient? And we give them the apps of Weed Maps and Canna SOS and great resources where they can go and find these things and tell them. But that falls back on your medical clinics too, to be a little bit educated before they get to them. Yeah, it is.
You can't send a patient out without doing anything. And I will tell you that one of the things, I don't see an awful lot of PTSD patients, but exactly what you were saying, I want somebody to have a support group or to have a therapist. And I'll help you get to sleep the night before so you can really work on what's going on the next day. But you have to have at least a support group or a therapist, or, I ask them to get it before I really treat them.
Okay.
I was in a session earlier where she kept saying pot docs. Well, yes, we are a pot doc, but the way we work our clinic, we're a medical clinic that does medical cards. We're not just a pot doc. We educate you. We tell you how to use this, and then we give you wonderful resources to finish up with the treatment.
This is not a certification mill, and there are a lot of certification mills where doctors will actually see patients for 15 minutes, charge them $200, stamp their card, and off they go. And that, again, unethical and totally irresponsible. Not once, I just finished a research study, not once did anybody know that they might not be able to get a job if they use cannabis.
Oh,
Nobody was informed of that. That puts them in financial distress,
Sure.
That's commensurate with their skills and their education. They might be able to get a job, but nothing that they can support their family on.
Right.
Speaking to that, let's come to the telemedicine thing really, really quick. Let me touch on this.
Yes.
There is a reason why Arkansas is taking so long with this telemedicine bill. The day after March 31st came, no more telemedicine visits. Okay, they cut them off for new patients. Now we can do recertifications. But that very next week, in my small clinic alone, I had 3 phone calls: Ohio, Massachusetts, in Minnesota called me. They had clinics where they were seeing Arkansas patients. The doctor that you saw was located in that state. They just paid a doctor in Arkansas X amount of money to sign your certificate and send it to you. You were not seeing an Arkansas doctor. And I think they want to get around that to where you can get your medical records. Like if you decide to go somewhere else, they can send me a medical records request. We're going to get those records right out to you. But now these people don't know where to get their medical records, and they've given them to this company and they've lost them. That's the big problem with telemedicine.
Anyone else like to make a comment? Here's the question. Oh, sorry. Where's the question? Yes, ma'am.
About bud tenders, you said what do you do to turn them into cannabis experts? So my question is, once you're finished training your bud tenders, do you consider them to be cannabis experts at that point?
I consider them to be knowledgeable about cannabis because I'm not a cannabis expert and I've been studying for 16 years. But I consider them knowledgeable, and when something new occurs, we make sure that people know. If we see something new on the market, make sure they have their resources. Make sure I do a lot of vetting of different educational opportunities. There are places that do very good cannabis education.
Yeah, but dispensaries are required to have a cannabis pharmacist. Is that correct?
In this state, it's a pharmacist, I believe. In Maryland, yeah, and in Maryland, it can be a nurse that has the experience, or a pharmacist or a doctor.
So what's the major difference there between talking to your bud tender for advice or talking to your on-site cannabis pharmacist as far as expert advice?
Yeah, she does a much. She has the time. She's a nurse in that dispensary, et cetera. The pharmacist can tell you the drug interactions. That's the big thing, with Plavix and the clotting factor with THC. They can explore those things and tell you, look at your drug list, look at what you're saying. The clinics can't do that because we don't know what they're going to buy at the dispensary. The dispensary gives them that resource where they can tell if there's going to be an interaction with any of their drugs they're taking or any of their lifestyle.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Lifestyle. And they are available 30 hours a week through the dispensary.
Yes, ma'am.
THC and THCV is.
I'll get that. What is the difference between THC and THCV?
One is a breakdown molecule of the other. The interesting thing about THCV is it doesn't have any euphoric effects, and it has those other two effects that we're really very interested in, that appetite suppression and the change of glycemic index. But similar from the same mother cannabinoid, but very unsimilar. Yes. I don't know, because I don't know the products as well as I should down here in Arkansas, but it's beginning to come across the states. You can see it in many states have begun to have some products that have THCV in it.
Casey, what do you think?
Are you reading for that? Okay.
Oh, no pressure. These are very great questions because one of the things that we talked about delivery methods a lot today, right? Or at least for my segment, that's really what I specialize in. I try and focus on reverse engineering the solution from the dispensary and the consumer or patient level all the way back down to how can we get you guys not only the blends and the specific catered effects to whatever it is that you need, but also focusing on these specific applications like THCV, which is a novelty cannabinoid, right? And when I say novelty cannabinoid, that means it's not inherently high in potency in the initial material, right? So if we look at a COA, I don't know if anybody's sat in on these previous panels, but these COAs are third-party analytical tests that we as industry professionals look at to see strain to strain the difference in variation between the terpene profiles, ensuring that those are very safe for consumption, looking at heavy metals, pesticides, and other things like that, as well as residual solvents. In that test, you'll see relative, if you look at a flower, for example, for most strains, in a 26% flower sample, you may get 1 to 2% of THCV or any of these ancillary cannabinoids. As we continue to evolve as an industry and as the market continues to, grow and we have more access to raw materials, there are certain things that we can do at a processing level to really hone in on those specific novelty cannabinoids. There's certain things like for us, we do high pressure liquid chromatography for our testing efforts. And there's this thing called flash chromatography, which again, not going to go super technical, but what that does is it isolates individual cannabinoids, and we can collect those over time and then develop products based off of those. So even though in the initial sample size, we may only get a 2 to 3% total potency or 40 to 50 milligrams per 1,000 milligram sample, over time and as the industry evolves, as we have access to more material and as cultivators continue to develop more novelty strains, those products will become more readily available. And that's where you've seen in more established marketplaces, those are already kind of hitting the marketplace. And it's because they've had a little bit of a leg up on us in terms of genetic development to cater to those specific novelties. And as we grow, that will be the intent here as well. So that's something that we and all of our other partnering groups, cultivators included, are going to be focusing on in the near future, because these different novelty cannabinoids also have extreme medicinal benefits, and we want to make sure that we're catering to that side of the market
Casey,
as well.
if she wants a THCV today, is it available to her?
There are going to be strains that are going to offer illicit effects with some THCV in there. Isolated THCV, I could be wrong, and I definitely don't want to speak out of turn, but I would say that I don't believe that that's it. Okay. Right. Yeah. And in a large part, there's a large difference. It's very important to understand that if you are getting things through a medical dispensary, for the most part, we're talking about the medical cannabis space that's highly regulated, and it's coming specifically from, state regulated plants, from cultivation and all of that. And then there's the hemp derived side, which I, as a hemp derived industry professional, would tell you that I would be very careful and make sure that you're vetting. You're going to hear a lot of different terminology: THCV, Delta 8 THC, Delta 10 THC. There's so many different cannabinoids. You said 100 and I don't even know how many, right? 100 and a lot. And because of that, these hemp derived companies in large part are taking that hemp and they are making those products. But because it's far less regulated, you as the consumer need to be very careful with where you're sourcing those products and make sure that the validation tests are being done if you're going to go that route. For the medical cannabis space, those are definitely products that we're looking at bringing down the pipeline as well, and bringing into the medical dispensaries as we continue to grow. Yeah.
Okay, y'all, we're going to, please go ahead. We're going to have to get close to wrapping up. Is there any other questions for our panel? Okay. Any other comments that any of you guys would like to end with?
And the one thing I'd say, I'd go even further. I think that there's a black market, and there's the market, the medical dispensary market, and then there's what I call the gray market, the Wegmans, the 7-Eleven, the gas stations, all of those that have these vape pens and stuff like that. They are not tested. They could tell you there's any amount of CBD in those. Nobody knows that for sure. They're just not tested. And so I'm really conservative about that. Lots of people come in and say, well, my grandson brought me this little baggie of something and it made me feel so much better. Well, we have no way of knowing what's in that, but we can then say safer for you to come here. But again, that's an older, I have so many older people, and you have to be really fiscally responsible about that. But I'm very conservative about that.
Thank you.
Hemp seed oil that is in that material.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
This stuff doesn't work. It's like,
It doesn't work.
You mean my stuff isn't any good?
My last comment is, as I said, we do see a lot of older people, a lot of people that come in. We have patients that have been referred, and end of life care and this and that. My biggest concern is those patients should go to the top of the list as far as getting a card, because sometimes they come afterwards. But if there are any older people, go ahead and get started on your caregiver card, because that takes 3 months plus to get. You've got to go through a background check, et cetera. If you're thinking about caregiver care, get started, because it does take, you've got to go through the fingerprinting, and then they send it off to the FBI. It depends on how long they're busy. It's taken as long as 3 months, and we fill out all that paperwork and take care of it, but get started on it early. Don't wait until the last minute to do it.
You want them to have
Yes.
some appetite, to have some nutrition, and you want them to be clear enough in mind to be able to talk to you. Morphine does not allow that.
No. And hospice care patients should go right to the top of the line. Their card should be issued that second that the application comes in. But unfortunately, in Arkansas, they go through the pipeline just like everyone else.
Anything else? Y'all, thank you very much. I believe we have a big hand for our We're going to have we're taking just about a 10-minute break. A 10-minute break, and then we have another panel discussion. This time, Dr. Brian Nickel will be moderating this panel. We'll have Ouachita Farms. We'll have Dr. Brandon Thornton, who is a pharmacist, Relief Center Dispensary, and Farm Harvest Cannabis Dispensary as well. So they'll be up in about 10 minutes.